Hi, our guest today is Michael Pighetti, who is the interim police chief in Milford. Mike, welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thought it'd be a good opportunity to introduce people to you if they didn't know you back when you were sergeant or before you retired. But I'd like to ask the first question is, Mike, you know your role as a caretaker until the selectmen pick the next police chief. But do you have any goals or aims while you're the interim chief?
Primary goal is to move the department forward in a way that we can accomplish some things that need to be done in the department to make the department better, to enhance it, and turn it over to the next person in good shape.
Okay, what are some of those things you mentioned?
Well, first of all, our budget constraints every year haven't changed. The budget is bigger than it was the last time I was here, but we have a lot more things that we need to pay attention to. There's a lot more technology in the building, and which you all know is very expensive. So the budget is something that I look at every single day, and I pay attention to it. But we have certain things that we need to improve on. We have certain software packages that need to be brought back into compliance and things like that, especially in the area of emergency dispatch. Some of their, everything works, but some of the software packages need to be updated and things like this, certain versions that we don't have yet.
Yeah.
But we're working on those. They're
Okay.
being implemented as we speak, some of them.
Okay.
Now, just out of curiosity, and probably something you has come to the forefront in the last 2 or 3 days, is what's happened in Texas and what's happened in Dayton, Ohio. Has that any impact on what's going on in the department?
Not in the front lines.
Yeah.
It's certainly something that I think about, and I have discussions with my staff, the sergeants primarily, just so that we're all aware of what happens in today's society, and it can happen anywhere.
And you do have the year-old special ops team
Yes.
as a response
Yep.
vehicle or a prevention vehicle, hopefully.
Yes.
'Cause I'm sure that a lot of people are, after what went on, are saying, gee, you know, that could happen anywhere. You know, are the Milford Police prepared for that? And I'm sure they are. And now's a good time to say, hey, look, we're ready for this, we're prepared for it. You can't predict somebody going nuts. You can only respond.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And we are extremely well prepared.
That's good, that's good.
We are well outfitted, and we are well trained, and we are ready to respond. My best hope is that we never have to.
That's something you don't wish on anybody. Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
But as you said, it can happen anywhere. Sandy Hook is a perfect example.
Right.
Small, quiet community, smaller than ours, and things happen.
Right.
You never know. You just never know. And you can do all the preparation in the world, but you can't get into someone's brain.
Right, so what happens is that one low nut is, you know, there's nothing you can do about the loose cannon. Drug issues that are going on in town, I'm sure that's probably one of the top things on the hit parade.
Yes, the opioid crisis is something that we pay attention to every day. And we've made great inroads in a short period of time with regards to that. Our overall numbers are down considerably, not only with the amount of calls that we take with relation to those, but most importantly, the number of deaths.
And the program with Amy Leone's group still continues, correct?
Yes, as a matter of fact, Amy and I are currently working on 2 new programs to implement.
Oh, that's great, that's great.
That's great.
Yeah.
And you're still operating under the same program of more treatment than arrest, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Getting people help at that moment when they realize they need it. And even if they don't, you're offering it to them.
Yes, always. Those policies are still in place, and they're still very active. We had one yesterday, as a matter of fact, and happy to say that most of them have success.
Oh,
We
that's
at
good.
least get them to the treatment facility, and we do our best to support them to try and help them stay strong enough to get through some of those programs. Most of the time, it's a crapshoot, really.
Yeah.
Whether they have to have buy-in. They
Right.
have to want to do it. It's like any addiction, whether it's smoking or
That's
candy,
right.
whatever it is, you have to be willing.
Right, but the thing
To
is,
cut it
with the
out.
program you have is you're offering it, if they reach that moment, they know you're there.
Yes, absolutely.
Whether it's the hospital, at their house.
Yeah. It's been well publicized,
Yes.
and we continue to do that. Our community outreach with regards to the opioid crisis is ongoing.
And I understand you got another 50,000 in the state budget this year to continue that effort.
Yes. we
Well,
do.
that's good. That's good.
It's on the way,
It's not there yet,
as
but
the
it's there.
governor says.
Yes.
Trust me, I'm with the government, and I'm here to help.
Pretty much.
But it's there. So, Mike, a lot of people don't know your background. I've had the ability to check it through various filings that we don't want to talk about. But you, in fact, almost 25 years ago, you helped found the first unit and department that looked at domestic violence and that type of issue. Correct?
Yes, 1999, I believe it was, or 2000.
Okay. And you also trained until your retirement most of the current force when they started working in the midnight to 8 shift. You were their training officer.
Yes. Well, with respect to the first issue, we developed and implemented the first in the area. I believe it was the first in the state,
Right.
where we partnered police officers with advocates of domestic violence and worked in conjunction with the district court. So when we had a victim of domestic violence, we could take them from step one right through the court process and make sure that they got the protections that they were afforded under the law. And with respect to the perpetrators, we worked as well with the district courts to make sure that they were prosecuted according to the law.
The law. Yeah, most people don't realize that of all the calls that a police officer gets, a domestic call is probably the scariest, because you don't know where you're going to end up or what you're going to find.
Yeah.
I learned that the hard way.
Statistically, for many, many years, domestic violence calls are always right at the top of the list as being the most dangerous for
Right.
police officers to respond to, for a host of reasons. One of the most prominent ones is you have a husband and wife, or you have two people that are living together that all of a sudden don't get along. Somebody calls 911 and reports a domestic violence incident. We respond. When we get there, sometimes when we tell somebody that we're going to have to take you to jail because that's what the law requires, the other person has a change of heart. And the next thing you know, they're jumping on the police officer. And I had an incident where when I was a very young police officer, we had a call in town, and the officer that I responded to the call with went in first. I went in behind him, and we were talking to the people separately. And when it came time to put the handcuffs on the male party, the wife changed her mind, picked up a cast iron skillet, and proceeded to hit my partner over the head. It wasn't pretty.
No.
Thank God he ducked at the last second, and she caught him in the shoulder. And
That's still
he was
hard.
out of work for a while, but
Yeah.
that's how it happens and how fast it happens.
Right.
Well, it's a very emotional situation that most people don't realize. And I don't think, if it's a choice between the brain functioning or the emotions functioning, it's all emotion in those points.
Yes.
And
Well,
so people don't think what they're
You
doing.
can't predict what you're going to walk into.
No.
I
Yeah.
had
No, and what I think is interesting is the original two, I don't know what to call them, counselors, went on to have careers in Milford
Mhm.
later on, and are still involved in the town.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
And very much involved in social service type
Yes.
of
Good.
employment.
Yes.
And they were great. They looked to me for direction every day, but I think I learned more from them than they did from me.
Yeah,
I
and-
just
and that
I did
unit
the
still,
implementation, and I developed the program, implemented it, and just gave them all the leash that they needed to go be successful, and they did a wonderful job.
and that's now
to their
baked
credit.
in as a part of the police department today.
Yes, it's still in place today.
Well, that's a good
Sometimes I
thing.
wish I had them back, because I don't know if they're as energetic now as they were when they were 18 and 19 years old, but they were an absolute pleasure to work with.
Yeah.
And it was tough for them when they first came in, because police officers back then were very close-knit and tight about anything involving the inner workings of the police
And
department.
you didn't have women in
So-
the department back then either.
No. So when we introduced a civilian, because back then, the police officers were still doing dispatch.
Right.
The only civilian we had in the building was the chief's
Secretary.
admin.
Right, admin.
Yeah.
So they were very, very skeptical. And it took quite a while. But these girls were persistent, and they made them take them to calls and do the job that they were sent there to do. And they won them over, every single one of them, one at a time. They did a great job.
Yeah. But let's also talk about your role as a training officer. I mean, you were, before you retired, you were certified as one of the top trainers in the area. I mean, you were, if I remember right, you have beyond just training the department certificates.
Yes.
I don't know how to put that better. but-
Training was always very important to me.
So except for the guys who were hired in the last 6 or 7 years, you've trained most of the people that are currently on the department.
When I retired, at that time, I had trained probably 90% at
Right.
least. Because in the old days, when you came out of the police academy, you automatically went to the midnight shift.
Right.
And you had to earn your way up to the day shift.
Right.
Some guys I worked with for over 20 years that
They like
were
the
on
shift.
midnights because they couldn't get to 4 to midnight because there was no retirements. We were right in the middle of the Vietnam era people that were on the department, and there wasn't any movement for quite some time. But I trained quite a bit of them, and as I said, training was always very important to me. I'm a certified trainer. I was for over 20 years, and I trained a lot of people. I taught college classes, both undergraduate and graduate, and I enjoyed every minute of it. I love dealing with people in that way, trying to impart some of my knowledge onto them. And luckily, the forte that I offered to them was real life experiences on the job.
Right.
And it was easy to teach police officers that were going to night school trying to earn their degree. But I did a few stints at what was Dean College at the time, and Western New England College, where I taught first-year college students, 18 and 19-year-olds, and they were a challenge. But at the same time, they were eager to learn. But they were a different group. You had to teach them in a very different way. Just like today, you have to manage people in a different way than we did 30 years ago.
Well, I was going to ask you. You've been away for what, 5 years, 6 years?
6.
Okay. What's different about policing in those 6 years?
It's a lot of it has changed, but yet it's the same. And I know that's hard to follow, but the way police work is done is still pretty much the same. Some of the laws have changed as to how we respond to certain things.
Right.
As an example, with the opioids and those types of incidents, we always looked at them as offenders,
Right. And now you don't.
and now we look at them as victims.
Victims.
So we address that in a completely different way.
So philosophically, it's a totally different. It's 180 degrees out.
Yes,
But you're
Yeah.
still going after the suppliers to them.
every day.
As I noticed, you've had your department's had a few arrests in the last couple of weeks
Every day.
of note.
I met with the detectives in the first week I was there. I met with the entire detective division, and I asked them to ramp things up a little bit, because I'm still a little bit from the old school, where if you cut out the supply, you have a better opportunity to help the people that are caught up in it.
Right.
You know, they're not strong enough, or don't have the ability, or don't know where to go for help
Well,
to get out of it. And if you cut off the supply, it's not readily available, and we gives us an opportunity to help them.
Well, the profile of an opioid victim has changed over the last 20 years also. A significant change.
Yes.
It's no longer the guy on Skid Row or whatever. It's
your neighbor.
It's your neighbor.
Yeah.
You know, it's just the guy that lives next door that OD'd in the
Who-
bathroom.
Yes.
Who chances are was prescribed a painkiller for an
Mhm.
illness
Yep.
and got hooked on it.
Yeah, it happens quite a bit with young adults or teenagers where they experience a sports injury, for example, and they're prescribed these things to help them get better. But, you know, we're finding out now, we didn't know 5 years ago what the impact of that would be. And now we're seeing it every day, and we're dealing with it every day.
Yeah, well, the medical industry has changed also. Doctors are now, you know, I'll give you 7 days, but I'm not going to give you any more than that.
Mm-hmm.
Which,
Yeah.
you know, under the right circumstances, that works. But sometimes 2 days and bingo, there, you know, it's a whole different story. But
Well, you know, in retrospect, you're also looking back and going, how did one drugstore in a normal town prescribe 100,000 pills in 2 months?
Mhm.
Nobody was keeping track of that back then.
Right,
Now they are,
exactly.
for obvious reasons.
Yeah,
and there are companies now that are paying a price for not keeping track of that in
Yes.
big bucks, which is not a bad thing. You know, I think people need to be held accountable for those kind of things.
yes.
And when it comes to the surface, all of a sudden people are saying, "Oh, wow, I didn't realize that."
Mm-hmm.
Surprise,
Yeah.
surprise.
Are there any big issues from a police standpoint in the town of Milford right now? I mean, obviously, opioid addiction and abuse is ongoing, but it seems to be a very quiet town with not a lot of overt crime. I mean, there are a couple of armed robberies in neighboring towns in the last couple of weeks. I know in Bellingham they had a store rob where the clerk was actually sliced up pretty badly, I heard.
Yeah.
We don't seem to have that.
No, well, we have a number of things that occur to the credit of the men and women of the police department. We have a really good track record of getting on these incidents early, running the investigations, working together, and bringing them to fruition, bringing them to an end. We had a house break recently, and shortly before I came here, I got a phone call from one of the detectives that said that he was on his way to Leominster to
Arrest the guy.
go get the guy. And,
Oh, right.
But it was through that legwork that all that happened. They, you know, they don't just take a report and put it in a folder and put it someplace. These are active files, and they work on them all the time. We have a number of cases that we're working right now, and we are also opening up some of our, what you know as cold cases. Some of them are 20+ years old, and we're taking another look at them. So I'm hopeful that
Well,
something will come from that.
Yeah, the evidence chain and the ability to determine other things off of this evidence has changed over the last 20 years too.
Yes.
You know, DNA, there's a lot of things that have changed, which is a good thing.
Mhm.
I mean, given you guys a better shot at clearing some of these cases,
Yeah,
as long as the evidence hasn't been corrupted.
right. And that's always a challenge.
That, yeah, it is. Even when you send it to the labs, recent history.
Right, right. And Massachusetts had their issues a number of years back. But we also have, we have an ongoing evidence inventory to make sure that we're in compliance and that everything we have is accurate and it's where it should be. And we're getting rid of some of the things that are no longer necessary. The cases are long closed and things like that. But that's a tedious job.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a very tedious job. It's time consuming, and because we still, much to my surprise, we still have some evidence in the evidence room that goes back to a previous software system that we had in the department back in the early 90s.
Mm.
So, in the 80s actually. So that's a bit of a challenge because those records, some of them are unretrievable. But luckily, we still have a few officers on the
That
department that remember the cases. So we're using them as a library.
Ah, there you go. So you won't let them retire?
No,
No, they're not allowed to retire.
no, I'm going to keep them around.
You
for a
don't
while.
accept retirement, right? I can appreciate that.
Well, speaking of retirement, I got an interesting question. I mean, you were enjoying retirement. You had already been interim chief before Chief O'Loughlin was picked.
Mhm.
What made you come back this time?
It's the $64,000 question.
I mean, because there was obviously controversy about the chief's
Yes,
contract.
yeah.
So just by coming back, you were stepping into
Yes.
an existing controversy. I know
Well-
you were asked a couple of times,
I said no 6 times.
6 times.
Yep.
What made you say yes on the 7th time?
When it got to the point where somebody was very serious about telling me exactly why they thought I was the right fit. And I had a discussion with my family, because if any of them said no, I would have declined.
Right.
But they all said, if you think you can make a difference,
Go for it.
go for it.
It's an
And,
unusual position because you technically don't know when you're going to be done.
No.
It could be October, it could be December.
Yeah.
Of next year.
I'm
No, I think they want to get somebody in before then.
realistically, having been through this process that
Right.
currently is ongoing 18 years ago, I can tell you that it's not a quick process. It's tedious, it's time consuming, but my gut tells me that it's probably going to be early spring. I think that's a realistic timeline, because if the selection committee can do their due diligence during the fall months, which I think they can, as soon as they get a consultant on board.
That's
As soon as they make that choice.
That's the meeting this month. August 13th is the next scheduled meeting.
Yes. That will set
And
the ball
hopefully
rolling.
they're interviewing the search firms that day, and they'll have one by the end of August. And then the ads will go out, and then things will start
Right.
going.
Because right now, they're just spinning their
wheels.
wheels because they can't do anything until they have that consultant on
Right.
board.
Right.
Once that happens, the consultant has a lot of work to do. And depending on how many applicants you get, exponentially that work can
Screen
grow.
them, find them, screen them,
Yep.
screen them again,
Test them.
Yeah.
do
Somewhere-
background work.
Yeah, somewhere around the beginning of the year, I think is a reasonable goal
At
for
some
them.
point, you're going to have maybe
then-
10 people that they're going to start winnowing down to 5,
Yes,
and then maybe 3 to 5,
Yeah.
and do visits and things like that. Well, you've
Yeah.
been through it, so I mean,
yeah.
that's probably a
But-
good expectation then.
I think it's reasonable. As I said, I'm speaking from prior experience,
Right.
so
The rules have
But-
changed since then.
a bit.
Yeah.
Well, the rules for the committee haven't changed much.
No, but the process is, the due diligence levels have changed a bit. I
Yeah.
think significantly in the last 20 years.
Yeah, they have. The bylaw is
This-
20 years old.
Right.
Well,
It was written in 1998.
I think
And
both the
approved.
chairman of the selection committee and the town council agreed the bylaw needs tweaking desperately,
Mm-hmm.
just because questions were raised during this process about it. And if you really want to argue, technically, the search committee that existed when you were the interim chief the first time, under the bylaw, still exists, because it doesn't say it goes away. That's how bad the bylaw needs tweaking.
Yeah,
So,
good point.
and
But
it has
with-
an even number of people, which it should have an odd number of people, so you could actually make a vote.
Yeah. Well, with respect to the question,
Yeah,
I offered the selectmen a 90-day window from the day that they make the appointment to work with the incoming chief, whoever he or she may be,
yeah.
to offer them a smooth transition time. And I think that's reasonable. And if they need me for 2 weeks, they need me for 2 weeks. If they need me for 3 months, they need me for 3 months.
Right,
But
that's written into your contract, so.
I'm not going to walk away until
Everybody's
the
happy.
new chief is happy
Well,
and comfortable.
you've got a
Right.
vested interest. You grew up in the department. You served in it at ranks, correct me if I'm wrong, but when they had the rank of lieutenant, you were in that.
Yes.
So you've been in the interim chief before. You live in the community. So you do have a vested interest in making sure there's a good transition, because you're still going to live in the community the day you're not interim chief
Absolutely.
anymore.
So when you go back to retirement.
Ah, I don't know when, but I enjoyed it. I
Did
really
you?
did.
Really?
I did.
And you are doing this
is it-
full-time, for those who don't know. You're not,
Right, you're not retired.
you're not in 3 hours a day. You
No,
went off the retirement system
No.
and you'll go back on later.
yeah. My shortest day since I've been here so far was 9 hours.
Mm.
But I'm not complaining.
Well-
I'm enjoying it. It's
Well, you knew what you were getting into.
exciting work for me.
I'm sure,
Yeah.
I'm sure. Well, without question, you wouldn't do it if you didn't have fun doing it.
Exactly.
If it wasn't fun,
Exactly.
you wouldn't do it.
Nope, because I was having fun doing what I was doing before I came back to the job.
Well, so you go back to doing that, whatever it is. What, making
Yeah.
bird feeders and things like that?
No, I worked in the construction industry
did you?
mostly. Yes.
Pounding nails, huh?
No, I've worked in the construction industry my whole life. When I wasn't doing police work, I was doing something, driving trucks or running
Oh,
heavy
yeah.
equipment or digging a hole with a shovel. I did many of those things, but and I enjoyed it. It kept me in shape. It got me away from police work when
It's a nice
when I
break.
wasn't.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Clears your head.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was fun, and I still enjoy doing that. But now I do it I was doing it at my leisure.
Right. It was more of a hobby than a
Yes.
way of life.
Yeah. If somebody called and said, "Hey, I need somebody to do something for a couple of weeks," and okay,
Okay, I can do that.
yeah,
And it was your choice.
it was.
Mike, we got about a minute or two left. What do you want the public to know about you? For the people who don't know you, what do you want them to know about you?
Most people in town know about me. I've been here my whole life. I'm just a guy that has been asked to do a certain job, to fill a position for a short period of time. And the people that asked me because of the skill set that I have. Having been in the department for many years, having been in this position before, it was something that they thought was an easy transition. They didn't, as they expressed to me, they didn't want someone from within the department who may be a candidate for the job. And they didn't want that person to be
Get
in the
elec-
position, whether
Right.
it be positive or negative.
Yeah.
Which I thought was reasonable, because the last time I was in it, I was a candidate, and I can tell you firsthand the struggles
Mm-hmm.
that are involved with that. Having to work with the consultant company and having to be someone who was investigated and interviewed by the consultant company was quite unique. But having to do things like that was difficult. And they also didn't want a stranger. They didn't want someone that they didn't know and didn't feel comfortable with.
So you were a known quantity.
And exactly. And if somebody had told me a year ago that this is what was going to happen to my future, I would have laughed and said, "You have a vivid imagination," and that would have been the end of the conversation. But in retrospect, I don't regret the decision I made
Good.
at all.
Okay.
Not at
And
all.
you were not sent in with any orders to do anything or change things or get rid of people or anything.
My orders were very simple.
Run the
You know the
department.
job, you know the department. Do what you need to do. Do the best you can for the people that work there.
Bingo.
And that's my focus every day.
Thank you. And at that, we're out of time. And Chief, we thank you for coming
Thank you
in.
for coming.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
our pleasure.
Thank you. Caitlin, we're off.